All right, welcome back to Naked Talk with Jess. I am super excited about our guest today, Sherri Lund. She is a certified Christian Enneagram coach and educator. And actually, she was a homeschool mom, which I was as well for many years, and a holistic health practitioner. And as a naturopath, she really focused on the emotional part of our being. And when we met the first time at a local co-working space here, I was really intrigued by that and just talking to her. And I've taken the Enneagram before on my own, left to my own devices. And we'll talk a little bit later about some of the things about that. But really excited to dive in and talk about the Enneagram. You may have heard about it. It's kind of one of those things you probably saw on your Instagram feed and heard your friends say, "What number are you?" But you don't really understand it. So we're going to dive into that and also let us know how it helps your personal development, but also enhances your intimacy. So welcome, Sherri, to Naked Talk with Jess podcast.
Thanks, Jess. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Glad to have you. So yes, as we were saying, certified Christian Enneagram coach and educator. Very exciting. We had a great conversation. So I'm ready to share with our listeners a little bit about that. So why don't we take a second just to allow you to let us know how on earth did you get involved in this Enneagram thing? What is it?
From a little girl, I wanted to help. I wanted to help people. I wanted to know that they were seen and that they were loved for who they were as a person, not a group collective thing, but as an individual. And I've always just kind of been drawn to the person that's on the fringe or that is invisible to other people. And so I grew up and went to Oregon State and was going to get my degree in human development. I did get my degree in that. And then had a slew of kids. We had 5 kids and homeschooled, and so all that got put on the burner. But when my youngest was nearing the end of his high school years, I went to school to get. Actually, he was in middle school, but I went back to school to get naturopath certified as a naturopathic practitioner, and I had a practice, had an office, had a staff, a slew of stuff, but and one pillar of my practice was the emotional piece, that we're holistic beings, and my dissertation was on how our emotions affect our physical body and vice versa. And so the emotions have always been a big part of my passion in helping people. And so when I closed my practice and thought, okay, what am I going to do in this chapter of my life, this last chapter of my life? What would I be disappointed if I didn't do? And so I decided to commit myself to coaching, and then that led to the Enneagram. And it's just such a beautiful kind of full circle thing of the holistic person, and seeing and celebrating each person for what they bring to the table. And there's some pitfalls that come with each one. And so if we can figure out what those are and what we can do to avoid them, take personal responsibility in doing our part and showing up and owning our part, wow, that can really make a big difference in our families and in our communities. So that's what I'm devoting my time to.
Yes, and I love that. And we talk a lot on Naked Talk with Jess here about often losing ourselves in motherhood, or that definitely happened to me, or like you said, things being put on the back burner. And we're in different seasons of life, right? So it's not that that's necessarily a negative thing.
Nope.
But it's so important to go back and make that full circle like you had. And I love that you're doing that in this season of your life. And all right, so let's talk a little bit about the Enneagram for those who either haven't heard of it or have heard about it, but probably don't have a proper understanding of it. What is it, and what isn't the Enneagram?
Well, I like to start with what it's not, especially in the Christian community, because I've had people comment to me and send me messages and stuff telling me I need to be careful with it. It is not demonic. It's not. There's not anything. I don't have a special handshake. There's not a special, code or
Oh
anything.
man.
What people see, the circle, the symbol looks weird. And it's like a compass on a map. It's all it is. It's just a diagram. It's no more, it's nothing more than like a map of the United States. It's just a diagram. And if I were to say, I was thinking about this today, if I were to say the word mother, each person that is a mother or has had a mother has an idea of what that should look like. And the word mother is not the same thing as the idea of what that is. And the way that relates to the Enneagram is that each one of us come with an idea of what the world is and our perception of that. And so we position ourselves that way. If we see ourselves as a victim, we see the world as dangerous, and we need to, so the way we see things is what the Enneagram shows us, where we are and how we see things, how we perceive the world, and our responses to that. So I see it as a description maybe of human behavior. And, as Christians, we have the Bible that tells us who God is and what his character and what his actions and thoughts are. And the Enneagram helps. It's not the gospel at all, but I think for me, it has helped me to see my response to what God is doing. And am I buying a lie, or am I believing the truth? And so it's really been a big help for me on my spiritual journey.
Oh, that's so interesting. And when you said that analogy about the word mother, it made me, of course, because we talk about shedding shame around our bodies and sex on here, think of the word sex. And it's very
Right.
similar. We
Right.
hear that, but it's what you think when you hear that word might be totally different of what I think because of my upbringing and my experiences. So I like that you clarified that for us. And yeah, so tell us a little bit more. So I first want to say, and we'll go into this more later, I'm sure, but I thought, okay, what's this Enneagram thing? Was feeling kind of left out. Maybe that's part of my number. I don't know. But I said, I'm going to take this test, went online, took the test. And then as I was working with a coach later, it was like, no, I don't think that's right. So I realized that I was putting what I thought I should put on the test and didn't really have the appropriate number. So I would maybe want to see if you could share with us, a little bit about that. And maybe we could circle back down to that later. But I think it's interesting that there might be people listening and they say, oh, I'm this number, and they've just taken a test and didn't really have a full understanding of it. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. Yeah, because when we take a test, we're reading it. We're reading it all mental. We're analyzing the question. We're thinking about it. Those are all part of who we are. But the parts that we're blinded to, that we do on, our spouse might be able to say, oh yeah, you're definitely that. Because we just have things that we just don't see. We just have blinders. And some things we justify. Some things make total sense to us, and that's because that's the grid that we're looking through. And so that's why we look at our spouse and say, doesn't this seem obvious to you? Like, you should understand the way this goes. And it's because they're looking from another lens, that they don't have the same perspective. They're not sitting on that circle in the same way that we are, and so they see things differently. And it's totally congruent with what you're talking about.
Well, I know that when I retook the test and had my number, even just reading the descriptions of it brought to mind things that my husband will say or comments. And it's not that they're even negative, but he'll say, oh man, and you just get bored so easily, and and this and that. And I'm a 7. So it just made sense and it felt right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I want to get a little bit into, before we go into intimacy, obviously there's certain ways that this can help us with personal development as well as communicating with others. What are some of the things that you've seen personally with the Enneagram and in your clients that they're like, wow, this has just really opened my eyes to this, or it's helped me in this way?
I was talking to a client yesterday, and we were talking about this this challenge that they're faced. Not a big deal. It's just an ordinary deal that comes up for couples. It's a decision that they're trying to make. And so she's wanting to have this conversation, and her number would be one that is real assertive and real forthcoming. And if you could imagine somebody leaning forward with their eyes wide open, you would feel the force coming off of them. And her husband is not that. And so he's not going to meet that intense forward pressure that she puts off in the same way. That would be maybe scary to him. That would be make him want to shut down rather than try to problem solve and come up with some brainstorming idea. And so we talked about ways that she could temper herself when she thought about what that conversation would look like from his point of view. She was like, wow, I did not realize that I could just change the wording a little bit or change the tone a little bit so that he's more receptive. And then he can see and be more open to what she's really feeling. And like, I am done with this thing. Okay. If you say it in the right way, he's more receptive to picking that thing up and helping you with it. And so the communication becomes so much clearer because they're aware and responding to each other respectfully based on their number.
Yes, that makes total sense. And so one thing that just comes to mind when I started seeing things that sometimes you said we may not even realize, seeing things with my number, I tend to, want to take on the next thing. Okay, great. I'm not real quite finished with this, but who is out there? What's next? And one thing was back in November, I love New York. I usually go every year. I didn't get to go this last year. It's just a lot going on. And I had an opportunity. It seemed great. And the person was even like, I'll comp your, ticket to the conference, just go. And so of course I'm like, yeah, I'm going, it's New York. Haven't been, started justifying it. Kind of reached out to my husband and, he's like, well, I don't know, babe, what do you think? And that's just his type, right? He's not going to say yes or no. And then I really stopped myself and I said, okay, is this just because it's something exciting and new? And I stepped back and said, why am I saying yes? And then for me at the time, it made sense to just cultivate the relationships I had in business that I had done so far, and try to get some of that cultivated versus now going on and going to a new thing and meeting new people. And so that was so helpful for me because I kind of stepped back and said, wait, why am I doing it? Reached out to my husband and he's like, well, I don't want to say anything, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
And so it really is so helpful, not only for yourself, but in that communication, because my husband probably is sitting back thinking, no, here she goes again, but he didn't want to say anything because looking now that we're talking through it, he probably didn't want me to respond a certain way. And so, yeah, I just love that. So what about, we know it's definitely will help with that. What is some ways that you could see that it would help with intimacy? And we all know that on the show, we say all areas of our life are interconnected and they affect the others. So it's not just, intimacy isn't just something that happens in the bedroom. If you've ever been in a relationship and had struggles, it kind of carries over into all, at breakfast, while you're texting each other during the day. It just kind of spills over into all areas of our life. So what were some ways that you see that could enhance our intimacy in our marriage?
Well, I guess, one thing that the thing that I come to first is what would be the thing that shuts intimacy down. And really, way back in my early college years, the psychology that we took, we all have the basic needs of needing to belong and needing to be secure, needing to feel loved, needing to be in a relationship where we feel trust. We can trust those that are caring for us. And that goes way back before we can even begin to talk. Those impressions are on us from our earliest days. And so when we come, so I'm imagining a 6 who is very cautious, if you like a deer in the, she's beautiful and very feels safe when she's in community, and she can see the others that are around her, but she's always on alert. She's just watching for danger and expecting danger to come. That's her defense, is her being alert. And that's kind of the way the 6 is. They just always have a stance about them. I'm curious as a naturopath if they would also have higher needs for adrenal support, for instance. I know that some of us have higher strung nervous systems. We just are wired a little tighter. And so we jump when people come into the room, So learning to be respectful of those things and building that trust for her would help her to relax and to feel secure. And when she's in a relationship, she's devoted and she's committed, and she will serve and do it gladly, not as a doormat, but generously, So it can be a very fulfilling relationship when she feels secure. But as long as she's like wondering, am I good enough? Is he going to leave me? Am I, so intimacy, like you said, starts way back in how much we can trust the other person that we're with. And to the degree that we can trust them, then we can relax and be open and receptive to them.
Yes, and that reminds me of a client that I was working with, and she sounds very similar to a 6, I would say. Great relationship, loves her husband, he's very supportive, and she just has a lot of stress and anxiety when it comes to, especially when they're going to be intimate. And she just said she doesn't know why she gets anxious and she's almost afraid, but there's no, it's not like he's physically, he adores her, but that just makes so much sense when you're talking about that and saying that just might be her nervous system. And is it almost kind of like a fight or flight kind of feeling?
Yes.
More
Yes.
so? Okay.
Yes.
That's what
you can imagine when a deer gets startled, how they stop, they freeze, and then they dart off real fast. And the 6s that's something that they struggle with all the time. Like they're constantly looking and aware of things like that. And if they're married to someone who is more aggressive or assertive, and a 3, for instance, is very task oriented. It's all about performance and goal, and having a good sexual experience could be performance oriented.
Yeah.
And if they're not thinking, if they're not aware of their spouse, and if they're not aware of their own tendencies, right? Even if they're not aware of what if they don't know what their spouse is, but if they know, I have a tendency to just go with gusto, then they're not allowing their partner to have a satisfying experience, because it's all about them and them meeting the goal and the reward and the performance. So and that's not a healthy relationship, right? So
right. And also I can just see how as well that 3, if they're in the moment and then they don't, if they're performance and goal oriented and that doesn't meet their expectations, how that can really bring them down.
Exactly.
And we talk about even just, and like you said at the beginning, sex means different things for everyone, but that's a big thing as well. If you go into it just so performance and goal oriented versus I just want to spend this time with you and connect and feel good with each other, I can definitely see how there would be some disconnect there, and also disappointment on the other person's end when that doesn't happen. So these are such good things for relationships as well.
And so imagine if it was reversed. Imagine if she is the 3 and he is the 6, right? Is that right? And he's having trouble and she's performance oriented, and it's not, things are not looking the way that they're supposed to be looking right now, right? And so then he can feel like, I'm not safe in this relationship. I'm, now, so it's real convoluted, and it's not just trauma or past history, but this is the way we're wired, and it's the way our psychological, mental, emotional, all of that stuff is is fine-tuned this way. And so awareness goes a long way in allowing us to relax these things that we're so uptight and rigid around. And when we can see ourselves and even laugh about these quirky things that we have, and if our spouse is on board and we can talk about that, we share a language, we feel seen and known and validated in ways that we never have before.
Oh, I love that. And I also like how you said you reverse the roles, right, with male and female, because something that I see with my clients as well, um, society a lot of times wants to say, oh, men are this certain way, they're aggressive, they're masculine, they're, love sex and they want it all the time. They can't get enough of it. And so imagine being a male that is not that way.
Right.
Or like you said, a female who's more assertive. Um, it's important to say we're not going to just buy into these things because we're all unique and we're all, God makes us different. And so just knowing that, I think that's so important going into that, because now you've got double, if you're not that quote unquote stereotypical personality, now you've got this one thing, but that on top of it. And
Right.
I can imagine that would be really stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
I really
they're
like that.
misunderstood. Yeah.
Yes. And I would see they'd be
Yeah.
less likely to open up as well about it.
Mhm.
I think people need to do this before they get married, actually.
Mhm. Yeah,
I
I
think
do
it would
too. I
be
agree.
very helpful.
It would.
You need to get on that, Sherri.
Right. I'll add it to the list.
Add it to your list, okay? Because, you know, even I was talking to uh, a young man, he's 24, and he and his fiance got engaged over the holidays, and even just the wedding planning, that so many things are coming to
Right.
mind. And he's like, this, and that, and he's this way. And so that's even coming to mind because you're not
Yeah.
even together yet. And that
Yeah.
can bring up a lot of things.
Yeah.
With your different types as well.
Yes. And when you're under stress like that, when you're under a gun, or, you know, our worst part of our type comes up. And so I become more entrenched in my fiveness when I get under stress. It goes off the charts. So to recognize those symptoms so that I can kind of slow that slide, and kind of stop myself and start to practice some things that would help me get more grounded again and to come back, so that I can be the person that I want to be in the moment. Yeah, the Enneagram is super helpful with that because I don't flip my lid as often. I can still flip it.
Parenting comes to mind a lot with that. Now I'm thinking, what do I do when I've got, all three of my girls, 2 teens and a preteen, and I've had a long, stressful day where I'm wondering what number do I go to? And that could probably help me kind of, okay, prepare myself before the pickup and maybe I see how that can help once people know their type before these stressful situations or before they're intimate. I think that would be really good. So let us know a little bit about, so what do you recommend if we shouldn't just go out in the Wild West and take this test, willy-nilly with it? What do you suggest?
Well, I'm trained through the narrative Enneagram tradition, and most of the good teachers out there, well, I don't know of one that recommends the test. The tests are taken, like we talked earlier, they're mental. You take them with a pencil or, online or whatever. And so you're thinking about the right answer. What I offer, and the people that I've been trained with offer, is called a typing interview. And so we spend about an hour on the phone and or in person if you're local, but I have specific questions that are geared to help me listen. I listen to your words, I watch your body language, so I'm picking up clues that are not just what you think about, but it's how you're responding in multiple ways. And so my questions are helping me to pinpoint what you might be, and we narrow it down to 2 or 3. I won't tell you, even if I'm sure I know what you are, I won't tell you one number, because that's really for you to sit down and you get to be the one who gets the ultimate vote on that. So the typing interview is hugely, hugely helpful.
Yeah, I can see, especially when you bring in that other dimension of be that training of how we're responding with all different things, not just the mental and what we think we want to put on there. So that is
Right,
interesting. And
right.
I like that. Where could we go to do that and get more information?
Yeah, so my website is initiatelife.com. And I have a whole section in there on the typing interview and what's involved with that. Mine is that hour. I actually have two calls that we do. I do the first one and complete the interview then and give you some suggestions, and then I send you some information based on the 2 or 3 types that we narrow it down to, so you can read over those things in a little book. And then we follow that up with a follow-up call a week or 2 later to give those questions time to settle in a little bit. And then we can narrow it down in that time period too. So, there's classes and stuff, and all those things are on the website. You can read a ton. So,
Okay. And then I know you and I had mentioned something else that you wanted to offer our listeners. Well, and so for that, for the typing class, you can actually, if you're listening, you can go in and put a discount code.
yep,
Is that right, Sherri? So the
yes,
discount code would be naked, and you'll get a discount on that. So that's awesome. Thank you for that, Sherri.
sure.
And then what is the other thing that you were going to offer our listeners? And I think, wait till y'all hear this. I think this is really good, and I'm definitely going to take you up on this. So tell us about that, Sherri.
Yeah, well, I'm working on a handout for your audience on the obstacles to intimacy. And each type, like I mentioned, has their predictable behavioral patterns where when we're on our last nerve, we just do these things naturally. And each type does them. And so I'm going to type them out, and I will have a link for you that you can put in the notes, the podcast.
Okay.
Um, and then so then they can go to my website, and so the link that will go to my website, and if they go to the contact form on my website, they can type in naked. There's a place for them to do that, and then just sign up for the newsletter, and I will make sure that they get that obstacles to intimacy download to them.
Yes, I'm excited to see that
I'm
as
excited for that.
well, and things that I can do, because what I really try to do is, you know, like most people, we're just we're jam packed our day. Even when even Sherri, I've gotten better about taking a day, or some of a day for myself and doing those things. Even on those days, I still feel spent sometimes after, my kids are here and the dog and just all these things, managing the house. And I really want to be intentional about setting myself up, because I'm big about, I want to enjoy my sexual experience too. It's not just for my husband, it's for me. And your partner, when they support you and love you, they want you to enjoy the experience just as much. So I've really been trying to do that. So I'm excited to see that download and see what else I can do to prepare for that. So I will be sure, if you're listening, you can go to the show notes. There'll be Sherri's address, her website there, with the typing call, Enneagram typing call, and as well as this free download for you to download. And I would love to know what y'all think about it, if that's helped you. And any questions y'all have, let me know and I can get them to Sherri. And I don't know, maybe we can do a Q&A later or something, with the
Yeah.
questions and all of that. So, okay, well, so the best way is Initiate Life to reach you, Sherri. What are you on Facebook? Are you
Initiate Life Now.
the same, Initiate Life
Mm-hmm.
Now on Facebook? And that
Mm-hmm.
link will be in the show notes as well. And then is there anything else you wanted to share with us, as far as I know locally you have some classes coming up?
I
So if
do.
you're in the Houston area.
Yeah. I have a class starting in February on marriage in the Enneagram. So we'll be able to take this content and we're going to expand it over 8 weeks. So when we get to the chapter on intimacy, it's a curriculum that I'm writing. And so the intimacy part will make sense because we will have gone through some of the other ones. So I'm super excited about that. And one thing that I felt like we didn't get to cover that I think is really important to cover is that some of the Enneagram numbers are more withdrawing. Most people would think of them as more of an introvert type. They're quieter. They're maybe a little more cautious or whatever. And they're not weird. They're not. There's nothing wrong with them. That's the way that they're wired. And so they need time. They need space. They need hand holding. They need maybe their hair to be stroked. I mean, they need to know that they're loved for who they are, and they need to be seen. I don't know how to stress that enough. But don't judge them as being prudes, because they just need their space. They just can't be rushed. And so when I put that question out there this morning on social media, and I said, I'm going to do this recording, what needs to be said? Some of those people were the ones that said, make sure you speak for us, because we associate sex with assertiveness and like power and domination and all of that. And that's not the way it is for everybody. And if that's the way one partner sees it, it's not so much fun for the other person who's not that way. So
yeah, for sure. Thank you for bringing that up. And that's one thing that I talk about is just one facet of it, that is porn, and how porn is not sex.
right.
If you've seen porn, or if you're seeing that and thinking this is what my sex is going to be like, I can see all kinds of things that cannot go well with that scenario. And just like you said, aggressive and all these things. And that's why a lot of people that I've talked to were terrified to have sex, because for whatever reason, maybe they saw things or heard from other people or messages, or maybe they did see porn, and you do it. A lot of times it's just aggressive, and that's, once again, I'm not saying that, that people that are aggressive, there's probably types like that, but it does not have to be that. And also it doesn't have to be like, you might see like very, thing I like to say, just because I thought this for a long time, honestly, myself, is that, they show you start having sex and then you go right into it. And there's, it's a very, like you said, a very like kind of rough kind of thing. And then the woman screams a lot and then it ends, And so if it goes anything deviated from that, all you think, oh, am I not doing it right? And, or something's wrong. Or if I don't like this, is something wrong with me? Am I not sexual? And so
Right.
I like that you, thank you for bringing that up. And just, I can see how knowing the different types, along with learning more about a healthy sexual experience, can be so fulfilling. And I was actually at a networking event yesterday, and someone was saying that it's divorce season's coming up. And so I'm assuming maybe because of the holidays, there's even more stress. And so people file for divorce, but they were saying it's divorce season. And so I'm just thinking of all kinds of things with your marriage class. That's a great time for it, because if you are struggling, let's look at these different things and say, are there things that we can do? And maybe it is something where you're just, the way that you're coming across is threatening or not going well with the partner. So I think all those are good things, and I'm excited to see how your class goes. I'm very excited for you. So
Thanks.
yes, thank you, Sherri.
Thanks,
Anything
Jess.
else do you want to say? I'm just like, I want to know more. You need to come back on. I'm super excited now.
Yeah, I'm super excited too. And I'm super excited of the potential that this can bring to families and to marriages, and, could save counseling costs or whatever. I mean, it's just learning to communicate well and how to hear and listen to another person. Just goes so far, and to start in the marriage is huge, and then it ripples to the kids, and it ripples to the extended family and the coworkers and all of that. But establishing trust and feeling secure in your most significant relationship is just the best thing in the world, right? So I'm super excited to be a part of this.
Yeah, one thing too, now there's so many different things, but I can even see for children, to let them understand that they aren't weird. They're, this is just how they, need to be, or communicating. Because for me, I'm very outgoing. I just will go in a room, I'll go in and talk. And then I had children, and I thought, I don't know why, this is silly looking back, but I thought my oldest, my first daughter, like, well, she's going to be like me. She's the oldest of three. She's going to be like me. And then, I have three girls with very different personalities. And I think it will help us as parents to, one, see what we might be communicating to them that we probably, if it was through a different lens, how are they seeing it or hearing it? But also, when you said it could save with a lot of different costs, like just that child getting that information could be really good. So what do you suggest for parents listening that think their children can benefit from it? Would it be the same thing, your typing call? Is that the same type of thing?
We really don't want you to type your kids. They're going to be all over the place. You don't want to judge them as being one type or another. You can observe them, and as you learn more about yourself and get more grounded in who you are, then you're there to encourage them. So say if I suspect one of my grandchildren are as a type 1, very rigid and very concerned about doing everything right, and so rather than saying, oh honey, don't worry, it doesn't have to be perfect, well, he's not going to hear it like that. He's going to be tempted to keep it all inside and not say what he's feeling, so if I just observe that without commenting on it, but I just go over and reassure him that he's doing everything just fine and that it looks beautiful, come around the back door kind of and support him. But it's his journey to determine what his type is. That's his privilege to get to own who he is. And so we don't really recommend. Now, if it's a high schooler, and some of the high schools are requiring Enneagram to be read now. Some of the colleges are teaching it to their seniors before they graduate. It's huge in emotional intelligence and personal development. That will take them far in their careers. But anything younger than high school, I would not even think about a test for them.
Yeah. Okay.
Just to get really grounded in yourself.
No, I like that you said I can see in myself, like, okay, I have a tendency to do X, and they're responding in this way. Maybe I can approach it a different way. But I do have 2 high schoolers, and I could see how that could benefit them in the next couple of years, and also how they interact with their teachers or their classmates, and as they look into college. So yes, thank you for sharing that, because I've seen many times, and I'll be like, I remember my middle daughter, when she was younger, she would get hurt, and I was just kind of raised like, oh, shake it off, you're fine, as an athlete. But then I saw she doesn't want me to do anything. She just wants me to acknowledge that she got hurt, and can I help you? Most of the time she would say, no, I'm okay, thank you. But she wanted that reassurance.
Right.
So looking back, I can definitely see that. This is just such good stuff. So, well, thank you, Sherri. And I look forward to, doing your guide for sure, the obstacles in intimacy. And I will let y'all know how that goes. I'll have all the links in the show notes, and I'll be sharing that on my Instagram. If you haven't connected with me there, it's Naked Talk with Jess. I do lives on there, Q&As, and just share more about what we talk about on the podcast here. So if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe so you'll know when new episodes come out and you don't miss anything. And we will talk to you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Jess.
Okay, let me see.